a memorial in New York City to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's only a few years old, and it was many years in the making, and it has carved into one of the marble pieces the quote we heard as our chalice lighting about the 4 basic freedoms we all deserve to expect in life. We will be using that same chalice lighting all month long, and we will be singing our mission all month long. Our theme for these next 4 Sundays is actually liberation. That's our theme for the month. The other side of that, for me, seems to be freedom, right? So my thinking was, when I went back and traced it, my thinking was liberation is the act of achieving freedom, right? But what is that freedom? What does that liberation accomplish? Many things is the answer. There are many ways to understand liberation and freedom. But the first place I went, despite everything, was to those 4 basic freedoms that FDR talks about. Freedom of worship is one of these. The freedom, he says, to worship the God of our choosing. We embrace that freedom here, and not just in the sense of worshiping the God of our choosing, but embracing the religion and the theological position and the diversity of our choosing. We, all of us here, are free to conceive of the universe in ways that make sense to us. We are free to worship in the ways that make sense to us, giving thanks, praying, meditating, sitting in the silence, listening, spacing out. Whatever it is, we are free to do it in our way. But we can only do it once we understand what our way is, and we only understand what ways make sense to us when we begin to pay attention to who we are. At some point in my life, and I honestly cannot remember when, someone gave me that book, The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho, to read. I don't know if anyone has read it. It's been read the world over, translated into many different languages. It's a sort of like a fable about a shepherd boy who starts to believe this recurring dream that he has about finding treasure in Egypt, and he heads off to find it. The book is about finding yourself and following your dream. It refers to this thing, the personal legend is what it's called in the book. That thing you knew as a child that you wanted to accomplish in your life, but you maybe lost sight of over time. And so while the book really reads like a story about destiny and fate and following your dreams, I read it as a book about discovering yourself also. The same way that as children we have dreams about what we might do, what we might accomplish in our lives, and that sometimes those fade or are forgotten or pushed to the side, so too, I think, when we are children, we are so embodied in our life that the question of who we are it's not even there because we're so in it. And eventually, we start to get messages from the outside and we start to wonder and question. And I know that happens young. Children as young as 3 or 4 are questioning their worth, giving into peer pressure, conforming to societal norms. But there's that moment for many of us, just that brief moment when we begin life that we're cared for and held and loved without question, without wonder about what we are. For many, that is a brief period, and then so much of the work of adulthood is remembering that first core, that first embodied, loved moment, those precious early days. By the time the shepherd boy is having these dreams, he has this feeling that something is missing in his life. Something is wrong, something isn't working right. And these dreams of far-off treasure send him journeying out across the world, selling his sheep and just heading out and leaving everything behind. He goes in search of that missing piece, in search of what feels wrong. He wants to find his personal legend. We spent a long time working on the language of our mission statement, as a few people in this room can attest. We went through many incarnations. The first section especially was a struggle, this first line about seek and what are we seeking. The seek part was easy. That seemed very obvious to most of us. Seeking, questioning, journeying, all of those are fundamental to Unitarian Universalism. We sing a hymn with the line, "To question truly is an answer," right? Like questioning is foundational to what we do. We are a creedless faith, meaning you're not told what to believe. That is foundational to us. We have to seek our beliefs and our meaning and the focus of our lives. We have to seek that for ourselves. Now, it's important to note that we don't say find it, right? We say seek it. This acknowledges that we don't expect that that journey ever really ends. We don't reach a moment and go, yep, I got this, I know my focus, I know myself, everything's good, we're done, right? That doesn't happen, it doesn't work that way. We are on a journey that lasts our entire life. We are seekers always, not finders, seekers. At one point, seeking our deepest selves was the language on the table for the mission statement. But in fact, it's not just about remembering those early moments, recovering those, seeking that deepest buried thing. It's also about the work of building and creating things that are new, right? We're not just trying to get back to something that's down there and buried, and if we just excavate enough, we would find it. It's not enough to say we will find our deep self or seek our deep self. We have to create it, nurture it, build it. And this is in part because we are always growing and changing. Our circumstances change, new challenges are presented to us. We are not a finished product. In one of the poems we read Friday night at our Vesper service, Audre Lorde asks, "Am I to be cursed forever with becoming somebody else on the way to myself?" Am I to be cursed forever with becoming somebody else on the way to myself? No, not someone else, just some version of you. A version of you because you are constantly becoming. Being means becoming in some way. We don't ever stop. We can't. If we think we have, we are fooling ourselves. So we are seekers, seeking but not ever finding completely the answers. And so we start here with seeking ourselves. That's that first step in the mission, seeking ourselves. And in order, we're doing that so that we might then seek our meaning and faith and beliefs. Because that step has to come first, the seeking of ourselves. There's that thing about being on an airplane and the flight attendant is like, put your mask on before you help the person next to you put their mask on. And it's sort of like that, right? That you have to look deeply enough. You have to look at yourself enough before you can start looking outward. You have to dig deep, honestly and truthfully, before the world will make sense, before you'll be able to figure out what you believe and what you want to do with your life. And I have the sense that when I say this, it sounds like I'm encouraging some degree of like selfishness or self-centeredness, right? But the quest for personal wholeness is not selfish. It doesn't need to be self-centered. We don't need to, as the shepherd boy does, sell everything and march off into the desert and like leave everyone we know behind. That's not required for doing the work of self-discovery. We don't need to relinquish our responsibilities and spend every moment in pursuit of ourselves, right? Don't. It's okay, you don't need to. And in fact, I would argue that you got to do the reverse, actually, honestly. I would argue that we find ourselves most often by living deeply into the lives we have. Not making grand gestures, but existing in our day-to-day life, living into our day-to-day life with all of its endless laundry and scooping up the doggy poop on the sidewalk and making dinner and doing dishes and all of that mundane stuff that makes up every minute of your day. In The Care of the Soul, Thomas More writes about what it looks like to take care of your soul, as the title implies. He writes about what it looks like to live deeply into all the banalities of your existence. He writes that we observe ourselves in our lives. We watch what happens. How do we react? How do we love in the world? What makes us laugh and cry? When do we feel authentic? When do we feel like we're faking it? What brings us joy? What brings us sorrow? We observe all of this in ourselves as a way of living deeply. Because for More, care of the soul isn't heroic or impossible or even particularly special or spectacular. It's the average, everyday, vital work of knowing ourselves. It's about being tuned in to yourself and living deeply. It isn't easy work. No one, I don't think, would say that it is. But the idea of living deeply into your everyday life has to do with finding wisdom in what is, wisdom in where you are. And it's nothing new. This form of finding wisdom is not new. Monastics in various traditions for millennia have touted the value of intentionality and awareness in our everyday living. That every act, if thought of in the right way, can become a moment for self-discovery, self-awareness, communion with the universe, with God, with whatever you want to commune with. But let's be real for a second. That's a lot of pressure to put on changing a dirty diaper. Not every moment is going to be like blissfully filled with awareness and deep living, right? We know that. It's aspirational. The entire mission is aspirational, right? We aspire to seek our true nature at our best. When we are living our lives according to our values, we are ever seeking our true nature, ever working at becoming the best version of ourselves. Because that's what we mean when we say true. We don't mean uncover that really at heart you're a misogynist or a racist and embrace that and live into it. Like, that's not what we're saying. We don't mean uncover anything and build it up. We mean uncover what's there and build up what is good. Because our faith is predicated on a belief that human beings have a capacity for good, an innate capacity for good that can be nurtured and fed and cultivated. So please do not leave here today thinking that true means anything at all, or it means that anything you happen to be or feel, right? When you're part of a faith that hopes, that is optimistic, that believes against all odds, sometimes, in the good of human beings, then true has a positive cast. And the hard work is that true is also what we make of it. We don't believe in a locked, fixed destiny. We believe in free will, the freedom to change, to become different, more, less, better. We can choose to bring out our best selves and to bring out the best selves in each other. But it begins with caring about who those best selves are, figuring out who those best selves can be, seeking them, seeking to understand them. We begin as seekers, knowing that we will always be seekers.